Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, welcome to our presentation. First of all, let me introduce ourselves to you. My name is Erlinda Dewi, my student number 8320202020, and I'm with my friend Adiba Nikmatul Ulya with her student number 8320202006. As you can see in our screen, our topic today is direct method. One, background. The last 2 decades of the 19th century led to a new age of foreign language teaching. C. Marcel, a Frenchman, referred to child language learning as a model for language teaching with specific emphasis on the importance of meaning in learning. He argued that reading skills should be taught before other skills as listening, speaking, and writing. F. Coin, also a Frenchman, is perhaps the best known of these mid-19th century farmers. He developed an approach to teaching a foreign language based on his close observations to children's use of language. He believed that language learning was facilitated through using language to accomplish events consisting of a sequence of related actions. His method used situations and the message as ways of organizing and presenting oral languages. It includes sequence of sentences related to activities. Consider an example of opening the door. I walk to the door. I walk. I draw near to the door. I draw near. I stretch out my arm. I stretch out. I take hold the handle. I take hold. The door turns on its hinges. Turns. Richards and Rogers. The example above shows that Quinn's method of teaching gives emphasis on the need to present new teaching items in a context that makes the meaning clear. The use of gestures and actions to convey the meaning of utterances are practices that make the meaning clear. Nevertheless, this approach was short-lived and only a generation later gave place to the direct method posited by Charles Berlitz. 2. Underlying principles. In 19th century, Lambert Southern opened a large school in Boston. His method was known as the natural method. He used intensive oral interaction in the target language, employing questions as a way of presenting and eliciting the target language. He argued that a foreign language could be taught without translation or the use of the learner's native language if meaning was conveyed directly through demonstration and action. His natural method had become the most seriously considered new development in language teaching in the United States. Maximilian Deverhits opened his language school in Rhode Island. He used a kind of method called direct method. Together with Silver, Berlitz successfully used the method in commercial schools in the United States and Europe. There were about 200 schools altogether. The basic tenet of Berlitz's method was that second language learning is similar to first language learning. In the slide, there should be lots of oral interaction, spontaneous use of the language, no translation, and little if any analysis of grammatical rules and syntactic structures. Most of Berlitz's schools followed the same basic course patterns, which he himself never used the term direct method, but Berlitz method. The principles of the Berlitz method were classroom was conducted exclusively in the target language. Only everyday vocabulary and sentences were taught. Oral communication skills were built up in a carefully graded progression organized around question and answer exchange between teachers and students in small, intensive class. 4. Grammar was taught inductively. Next, new teaching points were introduced orally. Concrete vocabulary was taught through demonstration of objects and pictures, whereas abstract vocabulary was taught by association of ideas. 7. Both speech and listening comprehension were taught. And 8. Correct pronunciation and grammar were emphasized. 3. Classroom techniques. 1. The principles above are seen in the following guidelines for classroom practices, which are still employed by contemporary early school as follows. Never translate or demonstrate, never explain, act, never make a speech but ask questions, never imitate mistakes, correct, never speak with single words, but use sentences, never speak too much, and make students speak much. Never use the book, but use your lesson plan. Never jump around, but follow your plan. Never go too fast. Keep the pace with student. Never speak too slowly, but speak normal. Never speak too quickly, but speak naturally. Never speak too loudly, but speak naturally. And the last, never be impatient, but take it easy.
SWOT. The first is strength. This method is focused on question and answer patterns. Grammar is taught inductively. The most important aspect is spoken language, so that pronunciation and grammar are taken into account. STT should be more than TTT on the time during the lesson. Instructions are given in the target language. Weaknesses. This method is focused on question and answer patterns. Grammar is taught inductively. The most important aspect is spoken language, so that pronunciation and grammar are taken into account. STT should be more than TTT on the time during the lesson. Instructions are given in the target language. Opportunities. There is no attention to some areas like reading and writing. It is not convenient for large classes. For people that are accustomed to teach or to be taught with the grammar translation method, direct method may not hold well. Threats. As we wrote before, some risks of this method are that for being focused in grammar and pronunciation, teacher will neglect reading and writing activities. And a good teaching method must fulfill the four skills activities: reading, writing, speaking, and listening.
Closing. 1. It was in 1901 that the term direct method seems to have been established when it was described in a circular of the French Minister of public instruction. And by 1962, direct method had become the only officially approved method for the teaching of foreign languages in France and in Germany. Before the turn of the century, the method had already been introduced into England, however, without becoming the official method. The imposition of the direct method as an official method created many difficulties in the countries which adopted it. In the first place, there were few teachers trained to use the method. Most of them had neither the fluency and the techniques nor the energy which the method required. People were also disillusioned since they felt that this method neglected the importance of practical and correct use of the spoken language. This method not only required a teacher who possessed a perfect mastery of the foreign language, but they made such claims on his nervous and physical energy as to entail premature exhaustion.
Moreover, Richards and Rogers argued that direct method lacked a rigorous basis in applied linguistic theory. It required teachers who were native speakers or who had native fluency in the foreign language. It was largely dependent upon the teacher's skill, rather than on a textbook, and not all teachers were proficient enough in the foreign language to change to the principles of the method. Due to these drawbacks, the use of the direct method in non-commercial schools in Europe has consequently declined by the 1900 and 1920s. A FAST project was therefore planned to solve the method problems by means of experiment between 1920 and 1935. There was an active period of experiment in America. The next result was the largest and most systematic study of its kind ever undertaken. Applied linguistics systemized the principle proposed earlier and laid the foundation for what developed into the British approach to teaching English as a foreign language, such as audiolingualism in the United States and the oral approach or situational language teaching in Britain. These were reference from our presentation, and thank you for all of your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.